This is Our News, the weekend edition, and on the broadcast tonight, one local pastor comes out in support of medical marijuana, but on the flip side, opposes the decriminalization of the substance. We've got his views. Plus, a former parliamentarian is questioning whether the government's over-the-hill bill will ultimately improve the lives of residents of the inner city. And police investigating an alleged suicide on a family island.
Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Good evening, I'm Andrew Knowles, and thanks so much for joining us. With Cabinet set to decide who will be on a committee tasked with presenting the findings of the CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana, one pastor says he supports medical marijuana, but not full-blown recreational use. Our Jared Higgs tells us about the research the pastor says suggests that young people will end up using the substance more.
Pastor Dave Burrows of Bahamas Faith Ministries supports medical marijuana. However, he isn't prepared to back the legalization of recreational marijuana. He says studies show that Colorado, which voted to legalize recreational marijuana use back in 2012, has experienced increased use among teenagers as well as an increase in crime.
That wherever it's legalized, the levels of intoxication increases. Now, here's the interesting thing. In Colorado, marijuana is only legal for persons over 21, but the highest level of increase was on teenagers. And so, to me, you know, the records indicate that marijuana use will go up. And the problem with that is that marijuana in general does not necessarily have a beneficial impact.
Burrows says another major concern is the impact cannabis can have on a person's mental health. He says his past experience with cannabis involves several friends being impacted by marijuana-induced psychosis.
If we have a higher level of marijuana use, we will see higher levels of marijuana-induced psychosis. In Colorado, the level of homelessness related to mental health issues related to marijuana increased dramatically. And all of the information is there in the article that I produced.
Research from the University of Boulder in Colorado has also suggested that cannabinoids, one of the active ingredients in cannabis, do less damage to the brain than alcohol. That study also stated that much remains unknown about the benefits of cannabis. Ultimately, Burrows says the Bahamas ought to tread carefully.
Obviously, I don't think God wants us to be intoxicated because it impairs our judgment. You know, I mean, if you try to drive high, if you do a lot of things high, it makes it much more difficult. You know, there are people who can navigate successfully when they're high, but a lot of people cannot. And, you know, I know from a lot of personal experience, people I work with and so on, I know the damaging effects of marijuana. You know, I remember back in the day, you know, when you get high, it depends upon how high you get. So if you get too high, the only thing you could do is sit in the corner in the club and bob your head.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Jared Higgs.
All right, thanks a lot, Jared. Well, while many wait to see how the over-the-hill bill will affect residents of the inner city, a former MP says he doesn't think that enough is being done. With that story, here's Georgie O'Bain.
Former Attorney General and MP Alfred Sayers QC says he's still waiting on a clear plan from the government on how it will improve not only the lives of those residents of the inner city, but also those on the family islands. Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis tabled legislation in the House of Assembly on Wednesday to establish economic empowerment zones in over-the-hill communities. Former Fort Charlotte MP Alfred Sayers QC says while the economic empowerment zones bill is a good start, he believes that more outreach programs are needed in the over-the-hill communities. He fears that the rising cost of living could force some residents out.
No, clearly there is a critical need for more outreach programs. I think the Economic Enterprise Act is a good start. because there needs to be economic revitalization. It has to be carefully monitored so that we don't have gentrification and drive poor people out of these communities because of the increase in price.
Sayers says it's not only the inner city communities on the island of New Providence that are suffering, but also the Family Islands. Sayers is recommending that the government give more power to local government on Family Islands.
But in Nassau, as well as our Family Islands, we need an effective system of local government. In most Commonwealth countries, local authorities have revenue-raising power. That is, for example, real property tax goes to local government. But here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, all of the tax go into the consolidated fund. And what you have is a disproportionate amount going back to our Family Islands. So as you travel throughout our archipelago, you will see that settlements are like ruins.
He also encouraged government to create incentives to encourage residents to remain on the Family Islands.
I think the only way that can happen if people in the local communities have the authority to raise revenue for their needs, and secondly, to be engaged in economic promotion and not leave it to the central government, but that there needs to be more power at the level of the people. Too much power is concentrated at the top.
Reporting for R News, I'm Georgia Bain.
From the crime beat, police on Inagua are investigating an apparent suicide. Police were called to a home on Burnside Street where they met the body of a male hanging from the ceiling of his bedroom. Medical personnel on the island visited the scene and pronounced the man dead. His body is expected to be flown here to the capital where an autopsy will be performed. Investigations are ongoing. Well, the lead article in today's Nassau Guardian, under the headline Deputy Gigi slams Hero selection, incorrectly attributed comments made by former PLP Minister George Smith to Deputy to the Governor General C.A. Smith. It was in fact George Smith and not C.A. Smith who was critical of the recent decision to name former Premier, the late Sir Roland Simonet, and former FNM leader, the late Sir Cecil Wallace Whitfield, as national heroes. The Nassau Guardian deeply regrets this error and apologizes to C.A. Smith. The Nassau Guardian will take steps to ensure there is not a repeat of what is a significant error for the publication and to safeguard the credibility of the Nassau Guardian. We will take our first break here, but still ahead tonight. Officials of the Shantytown Task looking to dismantle the criminal element within those communities. That story and more.